here I was sitting in my living room with a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old going, I don't think I want to do this anymore. So many years ago, my wife Stacy and I experienced some of the hardest and deepest pain that we'd ever experienced in our married adult life. And it wasn't from a doctor's report. It wasn't from our marriage. It wasn't from stuff that was happening in our house. It actually was from the church. And listen to me very carefully. You may have church hurt, and the church may have hurt you, but God didn't. And I want to talk to you for a few minutes because you might be watching, and maybe you, like us, have experienced some church hurt before. And maybe you've given up on church. Or maybe you've heard about other people's church hurt and you don't want anything to do with that. Or perhaps you think that maybe church is filled with a bunch of hypocrites because you see how people live outside the church and they claim to know Jesus. And you're like, well, if that's true, then I don't want anything to do with that. I can tell you that as being a pastor for 31 years, I've done this my entire life. I have seen the beautiful side of church. I've seen the side of church that makes you so incredibly excited and proud of the God that we serve and the people we serve. And church is filled with some of the most beautiful, kindest, warmest, giving people I've ever met in my entire life. So I want to say that as well. And I've experienced some deep personal pain and hurt from church. And I want to help you with that because I'm still in love with the church. And that's something huge for me to say. 21 years ago now, I don't know if I could say that. It took me a while. You see, I'd been in ministry for 10 plus years and was doing great, loving the church. Yes, there's always issues. Because there's people, right? So besides the normal issues that are happening, I remember a dark season. In fact, a friend of mine called it the dark night of the soul. And what happens when you experience the dark night of the soul? And what that means is you just feel so lost and so wounded and so hurt. Whether it's with church or with anything else, you can replace church with anything else. How do you recover from that? And I remember going home to my wife and having to say the thing that happened at church. Outside of our control, not something we did, but something we experienced. I remember sitting in the living room in my own self-pity, like we all do, and saying, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I don't know. I remember saying these words out loud. If this is how the church is, I don't want any part of it. I said that. And I was a pastor. I was on staff at a church. I was supposed to be the person championing the church, and here I was sitting in my living room with a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old going, I don't think I want to do this anymore. That was hard, and didn't know how I was going to get out of it. I was so wounded and hurt. And I think what helped me immensely was I also knew enough to know that that wasn't God.
Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Cam. I'm the creative arts pastor here at Crossroads. Real quick, I want to let you know that if you have any further questions, we would love to be a resource to help you find those answers. The link for that is in the description below. Also, we want to remind you to like, comment, and make sure to share this video with anyone that's asking the same questions you're asking. All right, let's get back to the video.
And I can't just lump everything church related into one bad experience. And I wanted to. I wanted to be so angry. I wanted to be so hurt. I wanted to sit in it. In fact, it was so bad that I left town for about a week, not because I was run out of town, but needed to just get away. And I went to a friend who had a company and literally just dug ditches for a week. That's what he was digging ditches. And I'm like, I'm just going to go dig ditches for a week. And I remember during that time, hearing the Lord clearly going, hey, you might be done, but I'm not done with you. And that was also hard. That actually kind of made me mad because I wanted to be bitter. And so I go back to my wife and I'm like, hey, the Lord's not done with us yet. And I'm so glad that I did because I went from that church hurt to this beautiful church called Crossroads that I've been at for 21 years. Is Crossroads a perfect church? No. Have I been hurt here? Sure. Have I hurt other people? Probably. Have I experienced some hard moments being on staff at a church, knowing behind the scenes stuff? Absolutely. And guess what? I wouldn't trade it for the world. And I love our church we're at now. And I almost missed the opportunity to come to a wonderful church where my kids were raised actually loving the church, where my wife and I are still active in leading a church. We love the local church. It's made of imperfect people. It's made of a lot of pain. And if anything, I hope that maybe you're watching this video and maybe you've been hurt by the church. Maybe you've been hurt by a pastor or an elder. Maybe you've been hurt by somebody you thought was a Christ follower. I want to encourage you. It's not all like that. And not everybody is like that. And guess what? There's people like that everywhere. I mean, there's people like that everywhere. I've had bad experiences at restaurants. It doesn't mean I don't go to any restaurants ever. I might not go to that restaurant again, but I don't stop going to restaurants. And I wonder why it is with church. Like, we have a bad experience in a church, and so we just say, well, I'm never going to go to church again. That's not good either. The church may have hurt you, but God didn't. And I also want to encourage you, there's a lot of incredible churches. In fact, there's more incredible churches out there than there are bad churches. There's more incredible pastors and leaders and people than there are not. And I don't want you to just sit there like I did, maybe in your own sorrow, and it could be very, very justified. And so I'm not downplaying your hurt and your pain, because there's some crazy bad stuff that happens in this world. And at the same time, I hope that maybe in a few minutes of this video, maybe you'll give church another chance. Maybe you'll be part of a beautiful story for somebody else. And so here's some things I've been thinking through around this, because out of all of these videos we're doing, this one's deeply personal for me because I've experienced it and I know what it's like. And I might not know your exact pain or your exact hurt from a church, but I know church hurt. But again, I also know that in my 31 years of full-time ministry, that was like a blip, a small season. It was just actually just a few months. The rest of the 30 years or 29 years have been amazing, filled with definite ups and downs and highs and lows, but wonderful, beautiful experiences with the church. And so maybe you've been hurt by the church people. And maybe you thought that if this is what God's like, then I'm done. Maybe you thought like I did, if this is how it's going to be, I don't want anything to do with it. But there's a difference between God and his people sometimes. So let me just say a couple things. The first thing I want to say is your pain is real. In fact, I don't want to downplay your pain at all. The thing you've gone through, and listen, being a pastor, I network with a lot of pastors and a lot of churches, and there's a lot of people carrying some hurt and some pain and some wounds, some self-inflicted, some not. But your pain is real, and it's okay to know that and to feel that, and not to let somebody else tell you to downplay it. In fact, if you've not watched it yet, there's a video in this series that talks about your suffering. Why do we suffer? I know that the best ministry that I can do comes out of the things that I've been wounded in the most, my pain and my suffering. My pain and my suffering has allowed me to help other people. It's allowed me to speak into the lives of people who are carrying around maybe that kind of hurt or that kind of pain. And it's not the only pain or suffering I've experienced in life, but in this regard, in this context, I can speak to somebody else and I can encourage them, hey, there is hope on the other side of it. There's also, now it took us a while. It took us quite a while to trust people again. That was the hard part. Because when you're hurt by the church, it's hard to then trust. And so it takes some time, and you've got to allow it to happen. So let me just first say your pain is real. Let me say this. People fail and God doesn't. And you've got to be able to disconnect the two together. Because you were hurt by a person, that does not mean that God hurt you. And again, if we're not careful, we will just lump everybody in together. We lump God, the church, pastors, elders, people, volunteers, neighbors. We just lump them all together and say they're all bad. Well, it's not true. We know that that's not true. And I think you got to get over your excuse of not going to church. Because if you're not careful, you could use your pain that happened at one point in your life and use it as an excuse because you just don't want to go anymore. So let's not use the pain of a hurt and then throw God in there and say, well, now I don't want anything to do with God because this one person did something that was painful. I mean, just think about what, even saying that out loud, like, it's not overly rational to think that way, is it? Like to say, well, because so-and-so hurt me and they're a Christian, then God's bad. Well, that's clearly not true. Nor is it true that every church is like that or every pastor is like that. And so I want you to know your pain is real and people are going to fail. God doesn't. And here's my next final thing. God's goodness is still there. The goodness of God is still there. In fact, Psalm 145 verse 9 says, the Lord is good to all, and his mercy over all that he has made. That's a beautiful thing, that the Lord is good to all and his mercy is over all that he has made. And I want to encourage you as I kind of wrap this up, don't confuse people's failures with God's faithfulness. It's not the same thing. The Lord can heal you. And I want you to know that his mercy and his grace is extended to you, and he wants to heal you. And here's the hard thing. In fact, there'll be another probably video about this at some point. The hardest thing that I had to do was forgive. That was hard because I didn't want to. And so what happens when people hurt you? What happens when people disappoint you? I could live in that bitterness and I would have been justified. I could have lived in that sorrow and felt like that was okay. The hardest thing for me to do was to forgive. And when I was able to forgive, it was such a freeing thing for me. And I want to encourage you, perhaps you've experienced church hurt, and maybe the thing you need to do is get to a level of forgiveness. The people on the other side, in fact, the people that hurt us, they never asked us for forgiveness. They never asked us to forgive. They didn't think anything more about it. We were just a blip and a passing and whatever. And then they moved on to other things. And here we are in our pain. And I just tell you that in those moments, God became real. His goodness was still there. And at some point in that process, I was able to let that go. And that's why I consider today and say, yes, I know the hurt. And I also know that God is still good. And I also know that his church that he's creating is beautiful. So wherever you are in your pain, maybe you turn this on because you've experienced church hurt. Your pain is real. I get it. But God is also still good. So I hope, if nothing else, that you will continue to give God an opportunity to extend grace and mercy to you.